Good morning, everyone. My name is Travis Weger, and I am a public affairs specialist with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, also known as USDA APHIS. And I'll serve as the moderator for today's for APHIS's first webinar on the American Rescue Plan Funding Opportunity Announcement. This webinar is being recorded for those who cannot make it for future reference to anything being discussed today. Joining me today are several subject matter experts, agreement and contract specialists, the program managers for the funding opportunity, and members from our executive steering committee. The webinar will run for a total of 90 minutes, with the first part of webinar allotted for the presentation, followed by a question and answer session. All questions will be submitted through the Q&A box, and any chat that you have will just be put in the chat box as well, and they'll be answered by the appropriate subject matter expert. So as a reminder, we have two boxes down here. You have the chat, which you can chat with the team, and then Q&A. Any questions, please submit those through there. That just helps us with housekeeping. To kick us off, I would like to turn it over to Roxanne Mullaney, Associate Deputy Administrator for Animal Care.
Hello, everyone. Today we are going to discuss the American Rescue Plan funding opportunity announcement. With $25 million available to cooperators within U.S. states and territories, including state and federal agencies, tribal nations, universities, non-governmental organizations, and private entities. An additional $5 million is available specifically for tribes, and we'll be hosting 2 tribal-specific webinars in the following weeks. The general funding announcement will be open from November 1st until January 15th, 2023, for a total of 75 days. The tribal funding announcement also opened on November 1st and will remain open until January 31st, 2023, for a total of 90 days. Opportunities are currently posted to grants.gov, and applications are accepted using the EasyFed grant system for non-federal entities and by email for federal entities. APHIS is really excited about the opportunities this funding will provide to expand our partnerships and further our efforts to build out the nation's early warning system, potentially prevent or limit the next zoonotic disease outbreak or global pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted significant gaps in both our public and animal health systems and revealed the limited options available for stopping the spread and preventing the pandemic. We have a great opportunity through the American Rescue Plan Act to fill these gaps and better prepare the United States and the world to address the threat of future emerging zoonotic diseases. Our goal is that through these funding opportunities, our cooperators will assist us in accomplishing the objectives under APHIS's American Rescue Plan strategic framework, which includes conducting surveillance of SARS-CoV-2 in susceptible animals and improving APHIS's ability to prevent, detect, report, and respond quicker to emerging and zoonotic diseases, including SARS-CoV-2. We are looking forward to many new partnerships to come. I'll now pass it over to Abby Stillwell, who will lead off the webinar presentation.
Great, thank you, Roxanne. And thanks everybody again for joining us today to discuss the funding opportunity for SARS-CoV-2 in animals. As Roxanne said, my name is Abby Stillwell. I'm a project coordinator for the work that APHIS is conducting under the American Rescue Plan Act and one of the program managers for the funding opportunities that we're going to be talking about today. This webinar will be focused mostly on the opportunity generally open to all applicants, although we'll touch on the tribal funding opportunity briefly, but as Roxanne said, there'll be a few other webinars that are more specific to that opportunity. Also note, we'll mostly be focusing on the non-federal applicants for the purpose of this webinar, but we can always answer questions on the federal side as well. So just to start out, I want to provide you with a brief overview of what we'll be discussing today. First, I'm going to introduce you to APHIS's work under the American Rescue Plan and what we've done so far. Next, Sarah Alley will give a brief overview of the funding opportunities and the priorities that we're looking for proposals under. Christina Klaus and Heather Trinium, our agreement specialists, are going to cover the next two sections. on how to apply and those guidelines for using American Rescue Plan funds. Then we'll go back to Sarah to talk about the proposal review process and finally wrap it up with some tips for applicants. Then we'll give it back over to Travis, our facilitator, to wrap us up and lead us into the question and answer section. We'll be holding all our questions till the end of the presentation, but we do encourage you, as you think of questions during the presentation, please go ahead and put those in the Q&A chat box. And then we can get right to them once we finish the presentation. As Travis mentioned, we'll also be recording and we'll be posting the recording of this webinar as well as the actual slides to the webinar, so you can refer to those later. Those will be on our One Health webpage under the funding opportunities subsite, so you can get those here in a few days after the webinar. So now we'll just get started with the presentation. So first, just want to provide you with some general information about APHIS and our work under the American Rescue Plan. As many of you might know, APHIS has taken a One Health approach to protecting animal and plant health, promoting animal welfare, and safeguarding global trade. And during the US response to the COVID-19 pandemic, APHIS really provided crucial support by coordinating with our state and federal partners to confirm infections in meat, as well as other animal species. We continue to do that to this day. Additionally, many labs within our National Animal Health Laboratory Network provided crucial and critical testing capacity for human samples as well. Back in 2021, you might also recall that Congress passed the American Rescue Plan Act, which included funding for the Department of Agriculture to conduct monitoring and surveillance for SARS-CoV-2 in susceptible animals. And APHIS was designated the lead in that charge. And this funding really underscored APHIS's important role as a critical One Health partner in addressing the pandemic. So to meet this charge from Congress, APHIS gathered veterinarians, wildlife professionals, epidemiologists, and other experts from across our agency to design our program and use this funding. We developed a strategic framework, which is available on the webpage, or you can also use that QR code on the slide. And it outlines our plan to prevent, detect, investigate, and control the spread of SARS-CoV-2 in animals, and also to build essential capacity for an early warning system for emerging diseases that could pose a threat to humans and animals. Our strategic framework also emphasizes forming and expanding partnerships with our One Health colleagues, and we really think this funding opportunity provides us with an opportunity to meet that goal. We believe this One Health approach will be critical to our success moving forward. In addition to the funding opportunities we're talking about today, APHIS has launched several additional initiatives, including 18 projects thus far to address our near-term priorities and the goals that are within our strategic framework. One of our goals with these projects is to conduct surveillance in a wide range of animal groups, including farmed animals such as mink, companion animals like cats and dogs, free-ranging wildlife such as white-tailed deer, and animals under human care such as those housed in zoos, aquariums, and wildlife rehabilitation centers. In addition to strengthening animal surveillance, these projects will also help us better understand which animal species are susceptible to the virus, the potential routes of transmission of the virus, and opportunities to prevent that transmission through enhanced biosecurity practices, as well as ways to improve our diagnostics so we can detect SARS-CoV-2 in animals faster and more effectively. Again, you can go to the APHIS One Health website to find out more information on the projects we've already funded. The website is listed at the bottom of each of our slides, or you can also just search APHIS and One Health in your favorite browser, and you should be able to find it pretty easily. So I'm now going to pass it over to Sarah, who's going to provide some information on the funding announcement and the priority areas for proposals.
Thank you, Abby. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Alley, and I'm a project coordinator for APHIS's work under the American Rescue Plan Act. And with Abby, I'm also a program manager for these funding opportunities. First, I wanted to provide a big thank you to Melinda Springer from the APHIS Veterinary Services Farm Bill team, who provided the baseline for the design of these slides. In this section, I'll be providing some general information on the funding announcements and an overview of our funding priorities. As a reminder, although this webinar will focus on the funding announcement titled USDA APHIS American Rescue Plan, SARS-CoV-2 in Animals, we will touch on the second opportunity that is specifically for tribes, tribal organizations, and those that are working on their behalf over the next few slides. Next slide, please. APHIS announced two funding opportunities on November 1st, 2022. The first funding opportunity provides up to $25 million in general cooperative or interagency agreement funding for cooperators within U.S. states and its territories, including state and federal agencies, tribal nations, universities, non-governmental organizations, and private entities. And it is open through January 15th, 2023. And going forward, we're going to refer to this funding opportunity as the general opportunity. The second opportunity provides up to $5 million specifically for tribes, tribal organizations, and those working on their behalf. And it is open through January 31st, 2023. And we're going to refer to this funding opportunity as the tribal opportunity throughout this presentation. And again, we will mention this tribal opportunity, but we are primarily focusing on the general announcement. The awards made through these funding opportunities will support research that directly aligns with APHIS's American Rescue Plan strategic framework and will fund key activities to meet our priorities, which we'll describe more fully in the subsequent slides. Detailed information on both funding opportunities is located within our One Health webpage, which is located at www.aphis.usda.gov/onehealth, which can be found in the bottom of each of our slides today. And then the QR codes in this presentation will take you to the resources related to the slide they are featured on. The QR code on the page we are on right now will take you to the funding opportunities section of APHIS's One Health website. Next slide, please. Both of the funding opportunities are requesting proposals that meet one or more of the 4 priorities listed on the slide. Note that these are not listed in order of importance. The first priority listed is to address gaps in surveillance and investigation activities for SARS-CoV-2 in animals, including farmed animals, captive wildlife, free-ranging wildlife, and companion animals. The second funding priority is to expand knowledge of species susceptibility to SARS-CoV-2 to improve understanding of potential roles or routes of transmission. Third is to develop surveillance tools and strategies for the rapid detection and characterization of new variants of SARS-CoV-2 to support an early warning system to prevent or limit future SARS-CoV-2 outbreaks. And the fourth is to identify effective interventions and other measures to prevent transmission of SARS-CoV-2 at the human-animal interface and/or impacts on the food supply. Please be aware that the full funding opportunity announcements have several examples of what types of proposals we might be interested in under each of the 4 priorities. And we encourage you to reference that document for more details. Next slide, please. As has been mentioned before, both opportunities posted on November 1st, but they do have different closing dates. The application period for the general opportunity closes at midnight Hawaii time on January 15th, while the deadline for the tribal opportunity is midnight Hawaii time on January 31st. The rest of the dates that we have in this table are the estimated timelines that we are anticipating meeting. We project completing initial application screening by January 20th for the general opportunity and by February 3rd for the tribal opportunity. We expect that the review period will be completed for both opportunities during the month of February, and that we will have an APHIS approved spending plan and begin notifying applicants in March of 2023. We expect the awards to be executed and the projects to begin between March and May of 2023. Next slide. We are doing some additional webinars. Today is our first general interest outreach webinar. We're going to present one additional webinar on the general opportunity on November 14th, and then there will be 2 webinars focused on the tribal opportunity, the first of which is scheduled for November 29th at 1 p.m. Eastern, and the second on December 13th at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can register for any of the outreach webinars on the APHIS One Health website when you navigate to the funding opportunities area. We would also like to make you aware that there are several opportunities to join informational webinars on Easy Fed grants, and these take place several times per month. You need to visit the Easy Fed grants webpage and take a look at their training schedule. Although we want to highlight the availability of the announcement for tribal organizations, and those working on their behalf, the remainder of this webinar is going to focus on the general opportunity, which again is open to cooperators within the U.S. states and its territories, including state and federal agencies, tribal nations, universities, non-governmental organizations, and private entities. Next slide, please. As Abby described at the beginning of the presentation, this funding opportunity is provided to carry out the animal health provision as described in Section 1001 of the American Rescue Plan Act, which we refer to as ARP. We will be getting into more specific details throughout the presentation, but we want to address a few general points up front. First, an eligible applicant may submit multiple proposals for this funding opportunity. In fact, we encourage you not to combine proposals for different projects within the same proposal, but to separate them into individual proposals for each project you are applying for. This makes it easier for the reviewers to score and rank them, and it will improve the likelihood of receiving funding. Second, applicants may request between $50,000 and $5 million in funding per proposal under the general opportunity. Third, we expect that the projects will begin between March 15th and May 15th, 2023. We would also like to mention that for all priorities, APHIS prioritizes projects that address the needs of high-risk, underserved, non-traditional, niche, and hard-to-reach audiences. I am now going to pass it off to Christina Klaus, an agreement specialist with APHIS's Agreement Services Center, to discuss how you can apply for funds.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. I'm going to start talking about how to apply for ARP funds. The following sections will mostly apply to non-federal applicants. However, we will provide some information on applicants from federal entities. Next slide, please. There are several items that need to be completed prior to applying for federal financial assistance. The first of which is registering with SAM.gov. Please be aware that there are several validations that occur in SAM.gov, so it is important to register well in advance. The next thing you will need is e-authentication level 2 access to Easy Fed grants. There are 2 links provided in this slide. One is for the online identity authentication, and the other is a list for the local registration authority locations that you could visit in person. This will provide physical locations by state. You will need to establish an account in Easy Fed grants, and more information on that process will be presented on slide 15. Next slide, please. Some additional administrative information has to do with the Unique Entity Identifier. The UEI has replaced the DUNS on April 4th of 2022. Applicants are now required to have a Unique Entity Identifier number. The UEI number is automatically assigned when a new entity is registered in SAM.gov. If your organization is already registered in SAM.gov, you have already been automatically assigned a UEI number and no additional actions are needed on your part. The Data Universal Numbering System, the DUNS, is no longer necessary. Please make sure to register early to avoid delays. Next slide, please. I will talk a little bit about requesting EasyFed grants access. There are 2 steps to request access to EasyFed grants. The instructions for e-authentication in EasyFed grants was discussed in slide 13. The links in this slide provide additional resources on how to create an account and gain access in the EasyFed grants system. Next slide, please. Federal versus non-federal applicants. Non-federal applicants must submit all application materials electronically using EasyFed grants. An overview of the EasyFed grant system can be found on the following website. That is the link that is attached in this slide. Federal applicants must submit all required application materials via the email on the slide, the APHIS ARP agreements at USDA.gov email address, by the deadline that was previously listed and also on this screen, 11:59 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time on January 15th of 2023. Next slide, please. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what to include in your application. This slide lists items that are to be included in the application package. The work plan, which is the body of your proposal and includes many pieces of information that are necessary. The financial plan, which has to do with your spending plan on the budget for the work plan. The SF 424, which is the application for federal assistance. The SF 424A, which is budget information, the certification regarding lobbying, and that is only for awards that are greater than $100,000. The standard form LLL, which is the disclosure of lobbying activities and is also only for awards greater than $100,000. The negotiated indirect cost rate if your organization is claiming indirect costs, and the single point of contact, which we know as SPOC, correspondence if it's applicable. More information on the proposed template for the work and financial plan will be discussed further in the following slides, and more information on the single point of contact will be presented on slide 20. As is noted on this slide, all forms are located on the APHIS One Health website. Next slide, please. You can find the work plan template on the APHIS One Health website under funding opportunities. It can also be downloaded from grants.gov or the EasyFed grants site. Applicants are strongly encouraged to use the work plan template provided. The template includes detailed guidance for all required information in the work plan. Work plans within the template cannot exceed 20 pages, while work plans not within the template cannot exceed 10 pages. Please note the use of diagrams, visuals, and reference sheets, as well as any letters of collaboration from contributors, will not count toward the 20-page limitation. When completed, upload your work plan as an attachment to the application in EasyFed grants. Next slide, please. A financial plan is also required for all proposals. Applicants are strongly encouraged to use the financial plan template provided, which is located on the APHIS One Health website. Applicants should double check that the financial plan total budget is the same as the budget information in the SF 424, SF 424A, and the work plan, specifically for the categories of personnel, fringe benefits, travel, equipment, supplies, contractual, other, and the totals. The budget narrative included in the financial plan should also align with the information in the work plan. We also request that you submit the financial plan in an Excel file format, not in a PDF form. Next slide, please. We're going to talk a little about the single point of contact, which we know as the SPOC. The single point of contact allows states to designate their own process for reviewing and commenting on proposed federal assistance. Several states have adopted a state process in consultation with local officials. A link to the participating states is included on this slide and will be provided in the webinar chat. Now, my colleague, Heather Trainum, will talk about the guidelines for using ARP funds.
Thank you, Christina. Good morning, or actually good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are located. My name is Heather Trainum, a management analyst with our Agreement Services Center. I'll now go over some brief guidelines for using ARP funds. Next slide, please. I'll discuss what is an allowable cost. As Christina just mentioned, each applicant must submit a detailed financial plan that provides sufficient information to determine the cost for each of the proposed activities and objectives. Allowable uses of cooperative agreement funds include, but are not limited to, personnel, equipment, supplies, and services needed to complete approved program activities that support the funding priorities and considerations described in the funding opportunity announcement. Full definitions of allowable costs are outlined in the funding opportunity announcement, but to summarize, they may include personnel, as long as it is reasonable for the work performed, conforms to the established policy of the organization, and is consistently applied to government and non-governmental activities. Awarded funds may be used for outreach materials as needed to complete approved projects that support the program priorities. Equipment, which is defined as having a useful life of more than 1 year and a per unit value of $5,000 or more, unless the applicant's definition is more restrictive. Information technology systems, which includes, but is not limited to, computers, network and ancillary equipment, software, firmware, and similar procedures, services, including support services and related resources. Work plans that include a cumulative request for information technology of $25,000 or more require additional USDA review. And travel for field work and other associated costs, including trainings and meeting attendance at conferences within the US and its territories. Next slide, please. I will now go over unallowable cost. There are several costs that are not allowed under the general opportunity. Funds awarded through a cooperative agreement may not be used for the following: cost incurred prior to the effective date of the agreement, construction of a new building or facility, or the acquisition or expansion of an existing building or facility, including site grading, improvement, and architect fees. Land acquisition, promotional or thank you materials, incentives to participate, or similar cost unallowable by OMB cost principles, which can be found in 2 CFR subpart E. This includes giveaway items such as calendars, rulers, pens, pencils, squishy balls, cups, refreshments, etc. Entertainment costs, regardless of their apparent relationship to project objectives, bonuses or commissions, management fees and profit, fundraising, meeting, conference, symposia, or workshop honoraria, which is payment to individuals or guests other than for documented professional services. Vehicle purchases or leases. Next slide, please. Additional unallowable costs include those related to positions that are already funded via other cooperative agreements or grants, For this funding opportunity announcement, positions to include salaries and benefits fully or partially funded by other federal cooperative agreements or grants cannot cumulatively exceed 100%. International travel for conferences, symposia, or trainings. Projects or activities associated with APHIS state industry cooperative program activities already funded via USDA APHIS annual cooperative agreements. Compensation for federal employees, salary payments, consulting fees, or other remuneration of full-time federal employees are unallowable costs. Another unallowable cost is travel for federal employees and federal subawards. Next slide, please. Now on to cost sharing or matching. Cost sharing, although cost sharing is not required for the general opportunity, APHIS may take into consideration an eligible applicant's ability to contribute non-federal funds to carry out a cooperative agreement. If a recipient includes cost share in their budget proposal and it is accepted by APHIS, the commitment of funds becomes legally binding, must be reported on the SF 425, and is subject to audit. Next slide, please. We will now discuss some ARP indirect cost. Due to a USDA statutory cap, a nonprofit's assessment of indirect cost is limited to no more than 10% of the project's total direct cost or the application of their indirect cost rate agreement, whichever is less. State, local, and tribal government entities are not capped at the 10% rate, and it is allowable for these entities to apply their negotiated indirect cost rate as applicable. Indirect costs are negotiated by the recipient and their cognizant agency, found in 2 CFR Part 200.19. The cognizant agency is the federal agency that provides the most federal funds to the recipient. The result of this negotiation is a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, otherwise known as the NICRA. A signed NICRA must be attached to the application in EasyFed grants if indirect costs are assessed. Nonprofit recipients that do not have a current NICRA may elect to charge a de minimis rate of 10% of modified total direct costs pursuant to 2 CFR Part 200.414F. No documentation is required to justify this rate. A statement must be included in the work and financial plan if the recipient decides to charge less than the NICRA or elect a de minimis rate. Indirect costs for any subaward must also be disclosed. Next slide, please. Cost effectiveness. Finally, please keep in mind while completing your application that project proposal costs must adhere to the following guidelines. They must be reasonable, necessary for project objectives, and they must leverage existing resources such as personnel, vehicles, and computers when it is possible to do so. I will now pass it back to Sarah Alley to describe the proposal review process.
Thank you, Heather. APHIS has developed a competitive review process to ensure all proposals are evaluated fairly and consistently. Next slide, please. Once the deadline closes for the general opportunity on January 15th, APHIS will do an initial screening to verify each proposal meets the eligibility criteria, which can be found in Section C of the funding opportunity. All applications will be reviewed by a panel of subject matter experts from across APHIS programs and may include subject matter experts recruited from other federal entities, academia, and known experts in relevant fields as appropriate. APHIS has safeguards in place to avoid any potential conflicts of interest. Next, APHIS will consider the review team's recommendations when they make their final funding determinations. A project may be selected for partial funding of specific objectives or activities within a proposed work plan based on the reviewer recommendations. Once the spending plan is finalized, APHIS will notify applicants, announce the spending plan, and publish the list of funded projects on its One Health website. Next slide, please. You may be wondering what criteria APHIS will use to evaluate the proposals. We have 4 main categories of criteria for evaluation. First, our review panel will assess the extent to which the proposal strongly supports and clearly addresses one or more of the priority areas we presented earlier. For reference, it's further described in Section A of the funding opportunity announcement. Second, our review panel will assess the extent to which the proposal is likely to successfully produce the expected outcomes and deliverables based on key factors, such as a well-organized and sound approach, a reasonable schedule, appropriate partnerships and collaborations, and the applicant's skills, knowledge, and experiences. The third main criteria our panel will assess for all proposals is the extent to which the expected outcomes and deliverables are likely to have measurable and significant impacts and value in the funding priority area, and how well the project implements equity considerations. Finally, the last group of criteria our panel will assess is the extent to which the proposal identifies a cost-effective approach to produce the desired outcomes and deliverables as compared to alternatives. We'll now pass it back to Abby for some tips for applicants.
Thanks, Sarah. Sarah mentioned we're going to go into the final section on some best practices, which are also available on the website. So first, our best tip is for sure to get started early. Do not wait until the last day or the day of the application deadline, because that will definitely be too late. This includes completing the registrations mentioned earlier to avoid delays, including registering in sam.gov, creating a USDA e-authentication account, and establishing an EasyFed grants account. Although registration in these systems should only take a few weeks, that's if everything goes exactly right and you don't run into any issues. So again, to be sure, please do start early, especially when you're getting those accounts created if you don't have them set up already. Next, make sure you read and follow all of the application instructions in the funding opportunity. We presented a lot of information today, but there's a lot more detail within the announcement itself. So we really recommend that you read each section thoroughly so you can make sure that your proposal package is complete. Next, be sure you align your proposal with the priorities in the funding opportunity, which we've also presented earlier in the presentation. There are examples of what we're looking for listed under each of the 4 priorities. And this is a good place to start if you have any questions about whether or not your proposal might fit under our priorities. Remember that the reviewer's job is to ensure government funds are well spent. So make sure that each item in your budget and financial plan is reasonable and justifiable. As mentioned a few times, check that the total requested and budget details in the work plan, financial plan, SF 424 and SF 424A are aligned. Also verify that the total amount of funding requested is the same in all of these documents. And finally, ask questions. We're available through these webinars, this as well as the 3 remaining, as well as offline via email, which we'll be providing later to answer any questions to help you along your journey. Want to highlight one final general application tip again. If you wish to submit proposals for more than one project, we definitely encourage you to submit each proposal in a separate application package. This makes it much easier again for reviewers to score and rank proposals and improves the likelihood of funding. And as you're reviewing the 4 priorities, which are again listed on this slide, and you find by chance that your proposal appears to address multiple topics or multiple priorities, please select the one funding priority that your proposal most strongly supports, as you're only able to select one priority in the work plan. In addition to the general application tips, I just want to provide a few additional specific tips on the development of the work plan itself. First, make sure your work plan includes all the information requested in the work plan template, especially if you're not going to use the template. Very important that you address all those areas. Page limits are 20 pages if you're using the template, 10-page max if you're not using the template. This does not include the use of diagrams, visuals, and reference sheets, as well as any letters of collaboration from contributors. Those don't count towards the page limits. Please make sure that you verify that the proposal directly and clearly supports one or more of the funding priority topics listed in the funding opportunity, and ensure your contact information is correct. Otherwise, we may not be able to get a hold of you. A proposal that is well written and easy to follow will be well received by the review panel. So please do take some time to think out the proposal's objectives, the deliverables and outcomes that will be produced from each of those objectives, and the activities and methods that will be conducted to achieve each objective. Check that the project's objectives are measurable, lead to specific results, and are attainable and realistic. And please provide sufficient detail for a reviewer to be convinced that you've really thought out the process well and understand the resources that you'll need to complete the task proposed. Finally, a few tips related to other required documentation. First, for Easy-Fed grants, when you're uploading attachments in Easy-Fed grants, you can click the attachment, add attachments button. Just as a reminder, attachment titles must be 8 characters or less, and you'll need to avoid special characters in the file names such as $, %, etc. Make sure when you're submitting attachments to make sure that all your track changes and comments have been resolved within your documents before attaching, and make sure you do not password protect your attachments or we will not be able to open them. A couple tips on the SF-424, check that box 16 to make sure that your congressional district for the applicant and project is listed. And if your organization has a SPOC requirement, make sure again that you indicate that status in box 19, as was discussed earlier. For those that have that process in their state, you'll be submitting your application to the SPOC simultaneously to submitting to APHIS, and any failure to do so will result in a rejection of your application if that is a requirement for your state. For the financial plan, again, just make sure that all those numbers and all of the different financial documents match. Make sure that you clearly link items that are within the financial plan to the work plan objectives. So if we see something in the financial plan, we want to be able to go back to that work plan and see where that expense will be used or what that will be used for. Refer to the guidelines for use of funds to make sure you're calculating your indirect costs accurately. If there are cost sharing contributions, which again are not required, but if you do choose to propose those, please make sure those are listed in the financial plan. Where possible, use only whole dollar amounts, and make sure to please submit your financial plan in Excel rather than PDF. That will make it much easier for us. And once again, please make sure your contact information is correct so we can reach out to you. I'm now going to pass it back to Travis, who's going to wrap up and move us into the question and answer portion.
Thank you, Abby. And thank you everyone for the presentation. So we'll now move into the question and answer segment. So let's start off with our first question. So we got a question, as a local government agency, it seems like this opportunity cannot provide funding for staff time or supplies for my state's USDA APHIS Wildlife Services branch and their assistants. Is that correct? To answer this, I'll pass it over to Heather.
Yes, thank you, Travis. And you are absolutely correct. Funding is not provided. And as I mentioned in slide 24, You can use that as a reference and, as far as the compensation for federal employees. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, so next question that we got is how this new call fund differed from APHIS, AFRI, SARS-CoV-2 collaboration announced in July. If applied last time, can apply again or need to wait? To answer this one, we'll go with Sarah.
Yeah, thank you for this question. So there's a few differences between what the partnership with NIFA is doing and what we're doing here. But the primary thing is that within the APHRI opportunities, you would have to meet both the APHRI criteria plus the additional SARS-CoV-2 interest to be eligible for funding through that. With this opportunity we're talking about today, you just have to meet the criteria designated by APHIS that's within the funding opportunity announcements. And yes, you can apply to both, but you can't get funding for the same activity from both. So if you were to be awarded funding through APHRI and you had applied for that same activity through this APHIS FOA, you would just need to talk to us and we could figure out if your full proposal was funded by APHRI, if there were pieces left over, and we'd have to work that out. But yeah, we can't double fund it, but you can still apply to both. And then the last part was, if applied last time, can you apply again or you need to wait? Well, you can apply to both the APHRI opportunities and the APHIS SARS-CoV-2 opportunities. So I don't think there's any wait time. And I hope that covered all of your questions.
Thank you very much. The next question is, from the perspective of an agency whose objective with this funding is to acquire samples from a target species, would I be sending these samples to a USDA lab for testing? Should I include an estimated cost to that lab in my proposal, or plan to cooperate with a separate diagnostic lab with funding for their work? For this one, we will pass this over to Tracy Dutcher.
Thanks, Travis. So the answer briefly is that you can do it either way. You can reach out to the USDA lab for discussion. I think they would be primarily interested in acting as a confirmatory lab, and that collaborating with a different diagnostic lab for the initial screening would be advisable. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We got another question that says, the instructions mention that diagrams visuals do not count towards the page limit. Should these be appended at the end of the application? It would be easier to read the visuals if they are embedded with the project description. However, that might make it challenging to count the pages with or without visuals. For this one, are there one of the panelists that would like to answer this one?
Sure, I can take a stab at this one. This is Sarah. I'm thinking about this in the context of how our work plans are designed. If you're using our template, it may be easier to append them and reference the appendix to do that. And I do understand that would make it difficult to do the page count if they are embedded within, and the value of having them embedded within. But my recommendation is to put those at the end. Any of the other panelists, please feel free to jump in if you have other ideas.
Hey, Sarah, this is Abby. I agree with that. I think that will make it so that we can more accurately count and make sure that we're meeting the minimum or the maximum number of page numbers. So a reference to them within the document would be great.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? That was all the questions that we received. Please let us know if you have any other questions. I'll wait for 15 seconds, and then if there are no other questions, I'll do my outro and leave a couple links and email addresses in the chat. So 15 more seconds. All right, thank you so much. And thank you for the the nice kudos on the Q&A for this very helpful webinar from anonymous attendee. So thank you everyone for joining. We hope this has been helpful and has answered your questions. If you do have any additional questions or think of anything during the application period, please reach out to Sarah and Abby at the contact information on this slide, or you can send your inquiry through the help desk at aphis.arp.agreements@usda.gov. So I will go ahead and paste that in the chat right now. So if you have any questions, please send it to that email address that I just posted in the chat. If you have any general questions on the American Rescue Program and not related to the funding opportunities we talked about today, please reach out to the Program Management Office, and I will go ahead and paste that one in there as well. So that is their email address. If you weren't able to join us for the full webinar, we will have an additional webinar on November 14th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. For more information on APHIS's funding opportunity announcement, please check out our website at www.usda.gov/onehealth/funding. I'll go ahead and paste that in the chat. One thing that I have noticed with that one is that you can't capitalize anything. So if One Health, the capital O and capital H is capitalized, then that it won't go and it'll say error 404. So please just make sure that if you do go to that website that everything is lowercase or if you post it in any of your stuff. So the recording from this webinar will be posted soon. We look forward to seeing your application. Thank you, everyone.